Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank you both for your testimony today. I would highlight a couple things about what we've heard this afternoon. First, Ambassador Volker, your written testimony in which you say, in hindsight, I now understand that others saw the idea of investigating possible corruption involving the Ukrainian company Burisma as equivalent to investigating former Vice President Biden. I saw them as very different, the former being appropriate and unremarkable, the latter being unacceptable. In retrospect, you said, I should have seen that connection differently, and had I done so, I would have raised my own objections. Ambassador, we appreciate your willingness to amend your earlier testimony in light of what you now know. And I think you've made it very clear that knowing what you do today, that in fact the president sought an investigation of his political rival, Vice President Biden, that you would not have countenanced any effort to encourage the Ukrainians to engage in such conduct. I appreciate also that you were able to debunk, I hope, for the last time, the idea that Joe Biden did something wrong when he, in accordance with U.S. policy, sought to replace a corrupt prosecutor, something that not only the U.S. State Department wanted, not only the European Union wanted, and not only the IMF wanted, but was the consensus position of the United States national security infrastructure. You didn't get a lot of questions about that today, as other witnesses did, because I think you effectively said that was all nonsense. We appreciate your candor about that. Mr. Morrison, I think what is most remarkable about your testimony is the acknowledgement that immediately after the Vice President met with President Zelensky in Warsaw, you witnessed Gordon Sondland meeting with Andrei Yermak, top advisor to President Zelensky, and then immediately thereafter, Sondland told you that he had informed the Ukrainians that if they wanted that $400 million in military aid, they were going to have to do those investigations that the president wanted. And you were later informed, and this is also significant, as you've testified here today, that the Ambassador Sondland had a subsequent conversation with President Trump and informed you that it wasn't going to be enough for the Ukrainian Prosecutor General to announce the investigations the president wanted. President Zelensky had to do it himself if he wanted to get that aid, let alone the meeting in the White House. Now, you've been asked to opine on the meaning of the term bribery, although you weren't asked to opine on the meaning of the terms high crimes and misdemeanors. But bribery, for those watching at home, is the conditioning of official acts in exchange for something of personal value. The official acts we're talking about here are a White House meeting that President Zelensky desperately sought, and as you have acknowledged, Ambassador Volker, was deeply important to this country at war with Russia, to show the United States had this new president's back. That meeting was important. That meeting is an official act. The military assistance is even more significant because Ukrainians are dying every day in their war with Russia. And so the withholding of military assistance to get these investigations, which you now have acknowledged, Ambassador Volker, was wrong for the president to request, the idea of withholding that military aid to get these political investigations should be anathema, repugnant to every American, because it means the sacrifice not just of Ukrainian national security, but American national security for the interests of the president personally and politically. Now, my Republican colleagues, all they seem to be upset about with this is not that the president sought an investigation of his political rival, not that he withheld a White House meeting and $400 million in aid we all passed on a bipartisan basis to pressure Ukraine to do those investigations. Their objection is he got caught. Their objection is that someone blew the whistle. And they would like this whistleblower identified. And the president wants this whistleblower punished. That's their objection. Not that the president engaged in this conduct, but that he got caught. Their defense is, well, he ended up releasing the aid. Yes, after he got caught. That doesn't make this any less odious. Now, Americans may be watching this and asking, why should the United States care about Ukraine? Why should we care about Ukraine? And this was the import, I think, of the conversation, the now infamous conversation in that Kiev restaurant with Gordon Sondland holding the phone away from his head because the president was talking so loud. What does the president ask in that call the day after the now infamous call he had with Zelensky? What does he ask on that cell phone call? Not whether the Rada had passed some new anti-corruption reform. No. Are the Ukrainians going to do the investigation? Meaning into Biden. And Sondland's answer is they're going to do it. They'll do essentially anything the president wants. But what's more telling is the conversation, I think, that Sondland has with the Foreign Service Officer Holmes afterwards, in which the president says, basically, Donald Trump doesn't give an expletive about Ukraine. He cares about the big things. And Mr. Holmes says, well, Ukraine's at war with the Russians. That's kind of a big thing. And Sondland's answer is no. He cares about big things that affect his personal interests. This is why Americans should care about this. Americans should care about what happens to our allies who are dying. But Americans should care about their own national security and their own president and their own constitution. And they will need to ask themselves, as we will have to ask ourselves in Congress, are we prepared to accept that a president of the United States can leverage official acts, military assistance, White House meetings, to get an investigation of a political rival? Are we prepared to say, well, I guess that's just what we should expect of a president of the United States? I don't think we want to go there. I don't think our founding fathers would have wanted us to go there. Indeed, I think when the founding fathers provided a remedy, that remedy being impeachment, they had the very concern that a president of the United States may betray the national security interests of the country for personal interests. They put that remedy in the Constitution, not because they wanted to willy-nilly overturn elections. No, because they wanted a powerful anti-corruption mechanism when that corruption came from the highest office in the land.
It is Wednesday, the 20th of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That's right, will no one rid us of this briber-in-chief? Oh boy. Well, the impeachment hearings are going on, and Sondland pretty much in his opening statement was saying, you don't go with, you don't bribe foreign government officials with the briber. You bribe foreign officials with the briber that Trump gives you. So this is very reminiscent of those Nazi generals who tried to assassinate Hitler. With the bomb and the big old table saved Hitler. They weren't trying to get rid of Hitler because they disliked his ideas about the final solution. They had to get rid of Hitler because he was an incompetent syphilitic who couldn't affect the final solution. Okay? I mean, they were perfectly happy to continue the Nazi regime. They just didn't think the guy was running it very well. And that's where we are with the GOP right now. Jeffrey Toobin asked this morning, is there, the big question is, will there be a Republican who respects the rule of law? And my reply was, no, Jeffrey, not a one. Not a one. We already have the GOP pretty much following up on weird QAnon conspiracy theories. Though there is a conspiracy theory in QAnon. Maybe it's the big one. I don't follow it that much. But there is one that purports that Donald Trump died early last year and this is a body double. Yeah. I don't know. I thought this guy was Superman. He doesn't. If you're going to get a body double, don't you think you'd probably get a body double that was like, I don't know, more like Superman? Come on. So, yeah, we got that going for us. Oh, to sum up the QAnon thing about Trump having a body double and all that, is that then they finish up their little screed with, we got to get more guns because the liberals are coming to kill us. What? I don't know how they make that jump, but they've been primed for it because we are the violent left, apparently for following the rule of law, which is a completely an anti-American thing nowadays. Who knew? Who knew? So, yeah, Devin Nunes is up there pounding the table about process, and he can't even get the process right, but that's okay. They want to subpoena Hunter Biden because he had a job on a board that he didn't even have to show up into the Ukraine for. Isn't that weird? $56,000 a month. Come on. That seems like a lot to people have to weld parts together, all right? Or you have to stand at the checkout stand and scan the scan. That might seem like a lot of money. And I don't know, maybe it is. Not compared to what the Trump kids have been getting. Please. So it's all a diversion. It came from Vlad. We know that. The whole idea of pushing it on the Ukraine as if they had some sort of grand scheme to I don't know. See, this is the thing I still don't get. The server's in Washington, D.C., okay, in the basement of, I believe, the Capitol building, right next to the file cabinet that the plumbers broke into at Watergate. You know, they're historical mementos. They're right there. But apparently, according to Nunes, in congressional open hearing in the congressional record, the Ukraine has this server somehow, even though it exists right there in the basement of the Capitol building. And somehow manipulated a way for Hillary to lose so that they could malign Trump. Well, I would think the best way to malign Trump in that situation is just to beat his ass in the election. Except it's kind of hard when you can manipulate 70,000 people spread across, really, I think it was like 5 counties over 3 states. That's what's weird about that. They were able to micro target it that close. And they did. So when we hear about this impeachment process is against the will of the people, no, people were in the streets the next day after the inauguration in protest really haven't seen since the first Iraq war, yeah. And, of course, that wasn't well reported, but I got to tell you, those were big protests in the first Iraq war. And so, yeah, you had one right after the inauguration. Huge. And maybe we have had it out for this mobster. because he's illegitimate, and everybody knows it. And his base thought, this is great, we get to kick the libs. What better way to kick the libs than to have a Russian plant in the White House? And now they're seeing the ramifications of that Russian plant in the White House. We never called him an agent. We called him a useful idiot. I thought he was more of a, asset myself. In this reporter's opinion, I've only been following this guy tacitly since he rose up into some sort of weird counter to the idea of what it meant to have love, peace, and understanding. His idea was gimme, gimme, gimme. And I'm going to go on TV and show what a virtue that is. You don't like it? Hey, I'm rich, and you're not. And people thought that was rather, it had pizzazz. Pizzazz. So, apparently Sondland's going to say that, hey, Pompeo and Giuliani and all these people knew. Everybody thought Giuliani really wasn't the kind of, the fixer we needed. But Michael's in jail. Okay? Michael's in jail. So they got Rudy. And people were pretty upset because Rudy, I don't know. I don't think he cuts a rather gracious figure. But do you need to be gracious in those circles over there? I don't know. I've never liked the idea of bribing or extortion. I've always avoided businesses where that might be the case. Oh, I know I was in the music business, and I gotta tell you, you think there's organized crime? Yeah, they got the music business. And I could complain that, the reason that, one doesn't, one's art doesn't rise to some great commercial success is because the mob. Well, on the other hand, bean counters have a certain kind of organization going on. And they seem to run the show a lot. What? I would call them a mob. But, how they cannot be the arbiters of art. The bean counters cannot. Please. Anyway, I've touched upon various industries and businesses where that exists, and I don't like it. So I've steered clear because I don't know. It's just I have shall we say, I have a line I will not cross. This line I will not cross. And I think that most of America, they don't shake down their vendors before they cut a check. Who does that? The mob does that. I have worked for contractors who gave you a hard time when you're standing there waiting for your check and you put in all your time and they want a list that you've already given them, but they want to go down the list and say, yeah, but did you really put in this amount of time? Is this really what the materials are? The paper is there. You should have gone over that before I'm standing here for my check. Yeah, so I've worked for, dicks and have subcontracted to dicks. But mobsters are the ones that shake you down and say, hey, I'm going to cut you this check, but you better kick me back some. What? No, I don't do business like that. And we don't bribe or attempt to bribe building inspectors. Boy, that was kind of expected in a certain large municipality in the Bay Area called San Francisco. That's why we never did any infills or rehabs in San Francisco. You would sit on a project for years until you finally grease the right engine, shall we say. And then your project will move forward, and you're carrying the carrying costs that whole time. You still have to pay the property taxes and everything, whether you are developing it or not. Let alone any loans that you may have out on the property. Don't do that. So this is the kind of government, they wanted to run government like a business, and they wanted to run it like a mob business. It seems to be working fairly well in Vladland, except I got to tell you, it's not. Some certain types are like really rich, but really, you want to talk about a class struggle? Let's not swing from one extreme to the other. Let's not be Bolivia. Oh, my God. Boy, that's a whole story in and of itself, and we have a whole curated show. Yes, we do. And that was Adam Schiff in his closing statement. I think that's going to go down in the annals of history. Rather impassioned, as it should. I thought it had pizzazz. Lots. And really, the GOP doesn't care that Trump is bribing people to get his way in contravention of the rule of law, only that he got caught. Which says everything you need to know about the criminal mind of the GOP. Yes, in this reporter's opinion, of course, but I think it's held by a wider circle than just me. I really do. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, well, Trump insisted the founders never thought impeachment was possible. But Hamilton in Federalist 65 sings a different tune, and he does a really good dance, too. Ensemble dance. McConnell blamed the House impeachment inquiry for the 400 bills he's buried alive in the Senate graveyard. Every now and then I have fun writing this copy. I do. And the impeachment inquiry did not stop the House from approving legislation to avert a widespread government shutdown later this week. Did you know that was happening? Yeah, well, we're still working, in spite of what they say about us. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the FBI wished it had acted quicker as China stole vital intellectual property for the last 10 years. And they acted just about a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, they wish they'd acted quicker. Over 10 years, actually. And Maltese police arrested one of the country's most prominent businessmen in the 2017 murder of Malta's most prominent anti-corruption journalist, Daphne Caruana Galizia. All that and more. On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit. Little programming note again as we start off. We had another weird glitch in our programming early this morning. David Pakman and the reprise of the broadcast got switched around again. And I have to assure you, those were put into queue in order. And I looked in the log quickly to figure out what went on, but I just saw they got flipped. So I need to figure that out. Now, I've mentioned that as these machines are degrading, I'm having a little bit of degradation on software, too. I hope that's not what it is. So I'm looking into it, and we here at Netroots Radio apologize, all right? Because we like to have the schedule be the schedule, because it's called the schedule daily. If you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link right there by the social media scroll. And Kelly takes care, she monitors the chat room, and she does a lot of other things too. Thank you, Kelly, for all of that. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon site, and I know this plea for funds every day has to be abhorrent. I think it is too, but we must at least suggest it daily, because we have been broadcasting 24/7, 365 for over 8 years, and it's because of your generosity in allowing us to pay our bills. And though the bulk of what we pull out of our wallets do that, it would this whole endeavor would be impossible without your help, and you have been so generous to us, and we thank you. And we need to buy newish machinery, as I have mentioned earlier. So, how about a recurring contribution, as I've mentioned, of like the cost of an espresso type coffee drink, or I don't know, it could be like one of those green spirulina drinks. Does anybody still drink spirulina? Is that an okay boomer type thing? Probably is. But send those funds once a month our way. And I got to tell you, that ISP bill does not go down. That's another thing. All the bills have gone up again. How dare they? But thank you for your generosity. It allows us to fulfill our civic duty, really, because we are Resistance Radio. Hey, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, among many other things, and we thank Tom for all of that as well. I take care of @Justice Putnam, and you could follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for everybody's social media obsessions. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, go to @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts, really wherever podcasts can be found, like, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. I'm riffing. Boy, the format of this curated show is like, some of these stories get really condensed because I go off. Okay, well, that's what we do here in a salon. We don't just expect people to just sit there as like bumps on a log now, do we? Consuming what we put into their mouths and their brains? No, a salon is for sharing ideas and ourselves. So, let's get on with this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for you to mull over. Yes, indeed. It is out of the American Independent, nay, Share Blue Media. Used to be. Dan Desai Martin, who was with Share Blue Media and now in its new branded incarnation as the American Independent, brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump complained that America's founders didn't want presidents to be impeached, going so far as to say something they never thought possible. Trump's comments came just before he presided over a cabinet meeting. Now, this is where I'm going to riff once again. But I am sorry. This guy did not ever take an American civics class, at least in America. He got a crash course somewhere along the line. And I'm not kidding. I'm quite serious about this. The crash course that the FSB gives to idiots, dupes, and assets. Because this guy has been following a constitution. I don't know, maybe it's in one of those weird alternative Philip K. Dick universes like Man in the High Castle. Yeah, I know it's really complex. I'm not going to go into it here, but, many different kinds of alternative realities can exist right side by side. You could be living in idyllic bliss at the same time that the Nazis have taken over most of America with a great swath in the middle that's just kind of like a no man's land. It's a little bit more complex than that, but you get my idea. So somehow in this alternative universe, Trump thinks that the founders never thought that impeachment was possible, so they didn't even bother to put it into the Constitution, except they did. So there's not much more to say about this, except, the Federalist Papers by Anonymous. Yeah, 3 guys. Yeah, maybe a 4th one too, by the way. Wink, wink. There could have been, I'm telling you. There's been some studies into that. But regardless, Hamilton wrote in Federalist 65 about impeachment. And you know what? There was a whole musical about it almost. And they had a pretty good song. And then there was an ensemble dance called the Ratification of the Constitution. They even had a big old vote. And they danced, and they danced, and they danced. And then we had the 4th of July. And then actually the implementation of the Constitution was really in 78. But we like it a little bit different. We like to have our holidays when they're convenient, please. So Trump has never read the Federalist Papers. He thinks it might have something to do with the Federalist Society, and yeah, they appropriated it. That's another one that really bugs me. How dare they take the Federalist Papers and twist it to their devilish means, because it's fairly anti-democratic what they've done. So the founders indeed thought very long and hard about removing an executive that would be, I got to tell you, exactly like Trump. Josh Israel, also of the American Independent, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Of the more than 500 bills that have passed out of the House of Representatives this year, just 66 have emerged from the GOP-controlled Senate. Now, the man responsible for blocking action on more than 400 pieces of legislation is pointing the finger at House Democrats and the impeachment inquiry for impeding the lawmaking process. In a Tuesday afternoon press conference, Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell complained that bills he believes are important have not been enacted due to the ongoing House impeachment inquiry. There are things we have to do that are not making progress on because of the impeachment obsession over in the House, McConnell said. We've yet to reach a deal on spending and defense appropriations. All made-up honorariums and really pandering accents are in this reporter's wheelhouse and opinion, by the way. McConnell argued that his priorities were uniquely essential. There are things we must do. There are plenty of optional things that aren't being done, but we can't philosophically agree on them. But government spending, the defense bill we've passed every year since 1961. The trade agreement with Mexico and Canada sitting there, unacted upon. Really, this is outrageous. It needs to come to a stop. You know, this is rich Moscow Mitch. You are the one that have not allowed these bills to come to a vote. These bills are in your graveyard, yes, buried alive. God, I hope there's air for them. Yes, there are. And they will be reanimated when there's a new Senate Majority Leader, Mitch. And then we'll have to figure out what to do with your zombie Federalist Society brain-eating judiciary. final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, of course, before we move to the chef's table, is brought to us by anonymous worker bees at Reuters. The U.S. House of Representatives approved legislation to avert a widespread government shutdown later this week, with a bill extending temporary federal funding through the December 20th. The legislation passed the House by a vote of 231 to 192, with all but a dozen Republicans voting against the funding because they still want to raid the housing allotment for military families so that they can build a wall, a big, beautiful wall. Well, now it goes to the Senate, where it's probably going to get buried alive, maybe. You know, this is one of the legislations that apparently can't ever be acted upon by the House because of impeachment. But wow, somehow we were able to garner all but a dozen Republican votes for this bill. How does Nancy do it? How? I'll tell you why. Because she's the greatest vote counter ever to hold the speakership in the House of Representatives. And man, are we lucky to have her now in this time of history. Let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. You know how in the Roadrunner cartoons, whenever something drops, like Wile E. Coyote falling off a cliff, it makes this sound?
And obviously, if you hear that sound, you assume that something's falling down rather than going up. And this is something that we as humans do automatically.
Anna Korzeniowska is an animal behavior scientist at the University of Sussex in the UK. And she wanted to see whether dogs might also associate falling objects with falling sounds.
But obviously, we can't ask them.
So instead, she recruited 101 canines, not all Dalmatians, in case you're wondering, and she had the dogs watch a short video sequence in the lab of a blue ball rising and falling on the screen. The video was accompanied by either a corresponding rising and falling tone or the opposite, more counterintuitive pairing of the ball falling with a tone that was rising. After running these tests, the researchers analyzed video of the dogs. They coded each frame using a program called GameBreaker, which is usually used to analyze sports footage. And the researchers found that while the dogs spent about the same amount of time looking at both video sequences, they spent a larger proportion of that time tracing the movement of the ball with their heads when the direction of the ball and the sound aligned, perhaps suggesting that they were more engaged when sight seemed to match sound. The results are in the journal Biology Letters. And although we can't truly know what the dogs were thinking, or whether this behavior really means they find corresponding tones and motion more captivating, it might nevertheless be something for us humans to ponder, as we play fetch with Fido. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? But did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
There are few actions as consequential as the impeachment of the president. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's what Representative Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, said in his opening statement on the first day of the impeachment hearings. President Trump's supporters, in contrast, have characterized the impeachment process as an attempt to overrule or negate the results of the 2016 election. Let's look at the Constitution. Impeachment and the possibility of removal of a duly elected president from office was very much on the minds of the founders. We know this because the Constitution is chock full of references to impeachment, with provisions regarding where the trial is, the Senate, and who decides, the senators, not a jury, and what the vote must be, a two-thirds majority, and who presides, the Chief Justice, and what the penalty must be, removal from office, and what additional punishment is possible, a bar to further holding of office, and the grounds, treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, and the effect on other criminal prosecutions after the president leaves office, none, and who takes over after the removal, the vice president. So yes, this is indeed a very consequential action. But no, the founders did not view the process as overruling an election. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1816. That was the day the Albany Typographical Society used the term scab to describe a strikebreaker. The word scab had been used in England for nearly 3 centuries as a slang, meaning a rascal or scoundrel. By the late 1700s, laborers began to use the insult to refer to workmen who wouldn't join a union or a strike. In the United States, the early 1800s were a time of organization among skilled workers, especially in cities in the Northeast. Cordwainers, or shoemakers, were one early group of organized craftsmen. Cordwainers who chose not to join the workers' associations were viewed with contempt as scabs. A Philadelphia cordwainer during a court trial in 1806 defined a scab as a shelter for lice. The Albany Typographical Society is largely credited for being the first organization to use the term scab in print to define a strikebreaker. Company owners have long tried to replace striking workers with scabs. In 1886, scabs replaced striking workers at the McCormick Reaper Works in Chicago. Police fired on the anti-scab demonstration outside the plant, which led to the Haymarket tragedy. The National Labor Relations Act, passed in 1935, attempted to make such strikebreaking illegal, but a 1938 Supreme Court decision created an opening for bringing in scab replacement workers. Perhaps the best definition of a scab is thought to come from the popular author Jack London, who wrote, "After God had finished the rattlesnake, the toad, the vampire, he had some awful substance left, with which he made the scab. Judas Iscariot was a gentleman compared to a scab. For betraying his master, he had character enough to hang himself. A scab has not." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Week 2 of the public hearings in the impeachment inquiry kicked off Tuesday with testimony from Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who serves as the Director for European Affairs for the National Security Council, and Jennifer Williams, a top aide to Vice President Pence. Both were listening in on that July 25th phone call between the presidents of the U.S. and Ukraine. Vindman, a Purple Heart recipient who emigrated to the U.S. as a toddler when his parents escaped from the former Soviet Union, was under attack by Republicans on the panel who questioned his character and allegiance to the U.S., and was even blasted by the official White House Twitter account. Vindman held his own, as evidenced by this exchange with Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney.
To a July 10th meeting in the White House where you heard Ambassador Sondland raise investigations, conditioning a White House meeting on that, investigations that you thought were unduly political. I believe that's how you described them. And you went to NSC Council and you reported it, right?
Correct.
And then later, you too were on the White House call. Am I right? You heard it with your own ears.
Correct.
Not secondhand, not from somebody else, not hearsay, right?
Correct.
You heard the president's voice on the call.
I did.
And you heard him raise that subject again that Ambassador Sondland had raised before about investigating the Bidens, right?
I did.
And I want to ask you, when you heard him say that, what was the first thought that went through your mind?
Frankly, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was probably an element of shock that maybe in certain regards my worst fear of how our Ukraine policy could play out was playing out. And how this was likely to have significant implications for U.S. national security.
And you went immediately and you reported it, didn't you?
I did.
Why?
Because that was my duty.
You still have your opening statement handy?
I do.
Could you read the last paragraph for me again, and the second to last one?
I think my dad would appreciate this one, too. Dad, my sitting here today in the U.S. Capitol talking to our elected officials is proof that you made the right decision 40 years ago to leave the Soviet Union and come here to the United States of America in search of a better life for our family. Do not worry, I'll be fine for telling the truth.
You realize when you came forward out of sense of duty that you were putting yourself in direct opposition to the most powerful person in the world. Do you realize that, sir?
I knew I was assuming a lot of risk.
And I'm struck by that phrase, do not worry. And he would have worried if you were putting yourself up against the President of the United States. Is that right?
He deeply worried about it because in his context, there was the ultimate risk.
And why do you have confidence that you can do that and tell your dad not to worry?
Congressman, because this is America. This is the country I've served and defended, that all of my brothers have served, and here, right matters.
Thank you, sir. Yield back.
Yeah, that was spontaneous applause that busted out in a congressional hearing. Go figure. The afternoon session brought testimony from two witnesses requested by the Republicans. Kurt Volker, the former special envoy to Ukraine, who had to revise his original testimony after numerous witnesses who came after him contradicted what he said.
In hindsight, I now understand that others saw the idea of investigating possible corruption involving the Ukrainian company Burisma as equivalent to investigating former Vice President Biden. I saw them as very different, the former being appropriate and unremarkable, the latter being unacceptable. In retrospect, I should have seen that connection differently, and had I done so, I would have raised my own objections.
Now, if you thought Tuesday was exhausting, get ready for a marathon Wednesday. Again, there are two hearings scheduled in one day. The morning begins with one sole witness, Gordon Sondland, ambassador to the European Union, whose testimony will likely be the most explosive we'll hear all week. He was one of the so-called three amigos who emerged as the point men on U.S. dealings with Ukraine following the ouster of Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch in May. In the afternoon, it's Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Laura Cooper and Undersecretary of State David Hale. But wait, there's more. When the hearings end for the day, the debate begins. 10 of the candidates still vying for the Democratic presidential nomination face off in Atlanta in Democratic debate number 5. This one hosted by MSNBC and The Washington Post. For the first time, all the moderators, 4 of them, are women. Andrea Mitchell, Rachel Maddow, Kristen Welker, and Ashley Parker will question the candidates. And then it's another early day on Thursday when 2 more witnesses come before the House Intelligence Committee in the impeachment inquiry. If you're wondering why we're not seeing any of the major players from the Trump administration testifying, it's called obstruction. Trump issued a directive telling staffers they are not to comply with any congressional subpoenas, citing something that doesn't exist, absolute immunity or some such nonsense. Although House investigators have dropped their attempts to get Mick Mulvaney and John Bolton to testify due to the length of time it would take to get through the courts, a federal judge says she'll rule by Monday whether former White House counsel Don McGahn must testify under subpoena to Congress. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate page.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow, we are starting to get deep into fall now, aren't we? It looks like we'll have a high topping out about 58 degrees. I don't think it'll be that high here at the mothership, though in the surrounding areas it is much colder. Some clouds this morning will give way generally to sunny skies in the afternoon. Winds out of the northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, shifting out of the east tonight at 5 to 10 miles per hour with clear skies, mainly sunny tomorrow with similar temperatures for daytime temps, though winds will be light and variable. Oh, should I add that come this Friday we are expecting quite a bit of rain. And that will continue through next week where, on Thanksgiving, yes, indeed, a mix of rain and snow is in the forecast. Rain and snow. Well, right now, pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is at 31 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is low at its new seasonal rating at 1. Wow, that's pretty low. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.96 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles. I should say right now we're a bit foggy, so maybe those clear skies will be much later. And relative humidity is at, 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 43 degrees and sunny. Even though there's Celsius there, we do it Fahrenheit. Paris is 43 and sunny. Rome is 58, mostly cloudy, and it looks like they, for some reason, have a thunderstorm advisory in the winter. Kyiv is 38 and cloudy. Kabul is 45 with a light rain. Hong Kong is 64 and fair, not to the protesters trying to keep their lives and their government. Tokyo is 50 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 and partly cloudy, and oh yes, still have a lot of smoke from not only hundreds of fires now, it's into the up above 1,000. Ouch. San Francisco, California is 54 and fair, though they have a fog advisory right now. And New York is 43 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Daphne Caruana of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, the FBI wished it had taken swifter action as Beijing recruited U.S.-based researchers to transfer intellectual property from American laboratories. China has repeatedly insisted Washington has exaggerated the problem for political reasons and asked for a response to the FBI's comments. A Foreign Ministry spokesman, Zhang Shang, said today that Cold War mentalities should be discarded. The admission by John Brown, Assistant Director of the Counterintelligence Division at the FBI, backed up a Senate subcommittee report that found federal agencies had responded too slowly as China recruited the researchers, leaving U.S. taxpayers unwittingly funding the rise of China's economy and military for how long? The last 10 years. Yeah, I would think that's a little slow on the trigger. Very slow. With our present-day knowledge of the threat from Chinese plans, we wish we had taken more rapid and comprehensive action in the past, Brown told a Senate subcommittee. The time to make up for that is now. Well, my dad always said when I was in my 20s, when I would rue that, I haven't started saving any money. And he'd say, well, you better start saving. Every day you don't save is another day you don't save. Start. Come on, it's never too late. So there's that. Acted a little bit too slowly. Now, it's not unusual. There's a bit of historical precedent about the FBI specifically being a little slow in figuring it out. I mean, they were only, about 30 years late on figuring out the meth crisis.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Chris Cisaluna and Stephen Gray of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and maybe there will finally be justice for Daphne Caruana Galizia. Malta police arrested one of the country's most prominent businessmen as part of the investigation into her murder. Jorgen Fenech was detained as he tried to leave the Mediterranean island before dawn aboard his luxury yacht, the island being Malta, of course. Prime Minister Joseph Muscat confirmed Fenech's arrest, but declined to say on what grounds he had been detained. We can only imagine. The arrest came a day after Muscat offered to pardon a suspected middleman in the murder of I'm just terrible at these names. Caruana Galizia, if he provided legally binding evidence of who was behind the killing. Muscat told reporters that he had ordered additional police surveillance after news of the alleged go-between emerged. Had I not done that, he said, today we might be talking of a person or person of interest who have potentially escaped. Fenech's lawyer was contacted for comment, but so far has issued no statement. Under Maltese law, the police have 48 hours to interrogate and charge him or release him. Caruana Galizia, an eminent anti-corruption journalist, was killed by a car bomb near the Maltese capital on October of 2017. A murder that shook Europe and raised questions about the rule of law on the small island. And I think it resonates to what's going on around the world and here in the United States as well. Hopefully justice will be served in this case. I hope they... Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news, including impeachment news, live probably even. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.